Welcome to another episode of Live from the Wish House with me, Chris Spinner. If you're a regular, welcome back. If it's your first time, I'm so happy you're here. My path profoundly changed when my son was diagnosed with autism. I was 40 years old, my marriage collapsed, and my life resembled a roller coaster. It was time for a life reinvention, and I began to develop my own philosophies to navigate and thrive. And that umbrella is what my life is shaped under. Now I'm here to share what I learned and what I continue to experience with the intention that together we can create lives we love to live. So please subscribe, like, share, and most importantly, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and stories. So lately, I have been consuming a lot of content. If I'm going to be honest, I think I'm a little addicted to consuming content that seems nostalgic. Now, before you jump on me, because I'm always the person saying that nostalgia and the past is a great place to visit, but we wouldn't want to live there. I still have that philosophy. I still have that Chrislosophy. But for me, there's a little bit of a twist on this content that is nostalgic. It is because a lot of the content that's being produced and labeled nostalgic is from looking back at the 90s, the 1990s. Because for me, I'm thinking nostalgia is 70s and 80s. I was a teenager in the 70s, in my 20s and the 80s. I mean, I can even go back to the 60s. I remember clearly being a child in elementary school, middle school in the 60s. So I have that 3-decade nostalgia label in my head. The 90s to me feels like yesterday. But listen to this. The 90s were 36 years ago. I don't even know what to say about that, because in my head, the 90s were about 20 minutes ago. And probably because I had my son in the 90s. So my son was born in 1995, and I began raising him in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. And when I think of raising my son and being in the early 2000s, I think of my son as being a child, and that feels like it's ongoing or present. I'm the mom and I have a son, and that wasn't all that long ago. All that long ago for me is the 1980s. But the 1990s, 36 years ago, and then I'm thinking, who are the bulk of the creators on social media apps or YouTube? People that to whom the 90s are real nostalgia. A lot of old school content on there that I remember, and I remember it very much attached to being a young mom, to having the experiences with my son. And so from scrolling through all of that 90s nostalgia, I came upon a new term that has been a little bit of a shift over for moms. The new term is butter mom. Have you ever heard this term? Butter mom. If you've never heard it, you're hearing it today. And basically what it is a mom of the 90s, a mom who raised her children in the 90s and perhaps spilled over into the early 2000s. And the concept of being a butter mom is being kind of a wearing jeans or the overalls and, just being a bit of an earth mom. But in the 90s, it wasn't so much of that feeling, being kind of like the mom on Growing Pains, being the mom who goes to the PTA meetings and has the VHS tapes set up for their child and still makes the games in the summer in the outside. And those kind of things have now become a bit of a trend. Are you in your butter mom era? So I think those people that are creating the butter mom situation here are speaking to young mothers today, because if you think about it, that era was without social media, was without all of the texting and the instant access to everything. We were still watching TV for our news. When I think about it, I can tell you one instance that I remember so clearly. There was a little girl, little Jessica was her name. Oh, when I think about it, I still get the chills. And she was about 1 year old, and she fell into a well. And the community was, coming out to get her out of this well, and the fire people and the EMTs and the police and community members. And it was on TV. It was covered on TV. And I remember being in my brother's house, standing, watching the TV when little baby Jessica was rescued. And I can still see that in my mind's eye. And I can see it in my mind's eye because the country was collectively watching this. We were still collectively watching things on TV that you could not access anywhere else. In one of the other episodes, I was talking about the recent moon voyage and how you could watch it on TV, but you could also watch it on streaming, and you didn't have to be home to watch it or be any place in particular. You could get your day's work done and then decide at 11 o'clock you were going to go catch up on what the astronauts were doing. Still united the world, but in a different way. And so the 1990s were probably close to one of the last, if not the last time that we had that kind of an existence. And I have been finding myself oddly attracted to that period of time because my son is now 31 years old, and I have a lot of nostalgia around that. If you have been listening to me for a while, my son has autism, and he has a lot. I've worked so diligently when he was young to help him to understand how to remember things from his past, because it was very challenging for him to verbalize it and to understand how great it is to have the nostalgia and to talk about the memories. And we did a lot of work around that. And now today, Anthony has so much to share and remembers everything. It's very interesting, things that I even forget. He's able to put into words. It really is like a little miracle, but we do spend time laughing about the old days and talking about the trips we took to grandma's or the shows we watched on PBS Kids, and he'll remember things that I don't even remember. And I love that period of time. I felt like that was a butter mom time for me. I didn't work in the summers, and I created all sorts of activities for him. I think it was a teachable moment. If you listen to some of my past episodes, you'll hear about the children that I rallied around Anthony to help him to discover how to play, how to take turns, things that he didn't know about life. And when I think about those days, the late summer nights at my mom's and crickets and looking through the grass for the solar light up stars that I scattered in the day, and it made me think, maybe people don't miss the decade. Maybe we miss what life felt like back then. And I think that quote makes us know we're on to something, because lately I cannot get off the topic of how much time we are spending in our reality in a more relaxed state just by being in our reality, as opposed to the time we spend in the social world, on apps, on media, on channels, engaging in content that are other people that we really don't know. So maybe we're not so much missing the past, we're missing what was going on in the past, what it all felt like back then, because I can tell you, it did feel slower. I don't know how that works, but I'm telling you, an hour then definitely felt different than an hour now. I had made myself a promise when I was raising my son that I would stay completely present. I know I read it somewhere. Somebody suggested that. Stay present in whatever you do. Look around and see what you're actually seeing and make sure that that's imprinted in your mind. I remember I had a friend once that said she worked at a job that kept her, over a 9 to 5, hours, and that she was working into the night, and that she was as present as she could be for her kids, and that, she had help in the house, and that she said to me when her kids were grown, after a conversation we had had about raising our kids and how we had raised our kids, and she said, I wish that I had the memories you have. When I worked, I was teaching and doing all sorts of part-time things as well, but it seemed in our life, in our parallel lives, I spent much more time in the creative butter mom land than she did. And she was regretting that. She said, I wish I had that presence of mind, because she said, I don't remember the way you remember. When you speak about raising your child, which, by the way, was difficult, child with a disability, but I often say, I don't see it that way. But when I talk about it, I have that warm feeling about it, because every day was filled, especially when we had time off, with new experiences and new activities and times of relaxation, and me making sure that I looked around. I have boxes of pictures, which I actually prefer, because I have 27,000 pictures in my phone and I don't delete them. I mean, I'm not deleting them because that's our whole life. But how many times do I look at the 27,000 pictures in my phone? I only go to look for it if I'm posting something and want a picture of my son from when he was little, or want a picture from last year when I was involved in the Halloween party or whatever. I'm not looking at 27,000 pictures of my phone ever. But I do often go to my boxes if I'm looking for something and sift through, and hours could go by. I like the tangible. I see what was. I prefer that. The tangible things that remind me of how present I stayed during that time. And I will tell you that an hour then really didn't seem all that short. I remember taking my son out after dinner. We would sit in the backyard in the summertime. My moms and my nieces would come over and we would just talk, and the kids would we had this big tube thing that they would crawl through, and, just simple little things that make us feel present. And I think that really is the impetus for all of this. Let's take a step back and see if we can somehow bring some of that into what we are doing at present. I'll tell you a little bit of a new phenomenon, for lack of a better word, that I have heard recently. People are purchasing tangible things that used to be. I just did this myself without realizing it was a bit of a trend. I just bought myself a rotary phone. It only cost about $40. And it literally is a rotary phone. Like, you have to dial the numbers. And it's not one that's hooked up to my Bluetooth. But most people are buying ones that are hooked up to their Bluetooth, so that they can have the best of both worlds, that they don't have to be walking around with the device in their hands when they're home, and that they can literally answer their phone and talk to their friends on this rotary phone, which keeps you, for the most part, in a seat and present while you're speaking, and you're not doing anything else. You're not having a text come in. You're not listening to a conversation and thinking, oh, let me just check my Facebook really quickly. While you're not split in a million different directions. People are craving sitting in their chair with their phone in their hand and being able to stay present in the moment of the conversation. And we're finding ways to do that. So these are things that I've always had just because I like the old school stuff, but I wanted a rotary phone just so that I could have it, just so that it's on my end table and I can dial my friends' numbers. Here's something that's interesting. I know one of my friends' numbers, by heart, by memory. The rest of them, when I call from that phone, I have to take my phone and look up the numbers. If you're of a certain age, if you're my age, remember knowing all of the phone numbers of your friends. I remember my friend Nancy in elementary school, 7534892. To this day, I know it. But I don't know my friends' phone numbers now. Isn't that crazy? But I look them up now and I dial them on my rotary phone. Another thing is radios. People are buying actual radios to keep in their kitchen or in their bedroom. And many of these radios have all the gadgets to make sure you're connected to different things. But people are enjoying going and looking at their radio, turning it on. Now, I have an old school radio. It doesn't do anything. If you want to change the channel, you have to literally turn the knob. I have one in my bedroom and one by my coffee pot. Every morning, same routine. Coffee is made, pouring the coffee, flick on the radio. I like the feeling of that person's voice coming through the radio in my kitchen. I can stream it on my phone and get my work done. I do all of my posting for my content creating in the morning. So I could have that streaming on my phone, but there's something about it that makes me feel like it's not keeping me present. Somehow that voice coming out of the radio that's sitting on my kitchen counter is keeping me present. There's so many things like that people are seeking out because we're missing what it felt like We're missing that present feeling. We're missing something we can hold on to. And now we're getting a lot of nostalgia coming back. And I heard Pizza Hut is coming back. Like a lot of businesses are returning to the old school decor, the ways of doing things. Even Clay Aiken, the singer, is making a resurgence. And I think it's because we are at a precipice of missing what used to be. And it's not just things like the music. During the 1990s, let's say, if I felt nostalgic about the 70s, it was because I thought, oh, that band isn't around anymore, so I could get my CD and listen to that band, okay? But I don't think that's what we're looking for now. It's more feeling-based. You know, I read a quote the other day. I'm so big on quotes lately. I'm writing everything down, so I'm going to read it. It says, life used to happen around kitchen tables, not notifications. Well, if you know me, that's always been my favorite place, the kitchen table. My best memories come from coffee at the kitchen table. Even as a young girl, my friends, Mona and Lisa, yep, they were twins, Mona and Lisa. We used to sit around their kitchen table at their house with their mom and chat. And I remember to this day that warm feeling that gave me, sitting at the kitchen table. I remember thinking, when I grow up, I'm going to get a house and I'm going to always have my children or my friends around the kitchen table. It's where I bring everybody first. You come into my house, we're going to go to the kitchen table. It's always the place. There's always a little food there. There's some coffee there. I love the kitchen table because I think that's where the real stuff happens. That's where the eye-to-eye contact and the social networking happens. It's where the love occurs, at the kitchen table, as opposed to later on when we go hang out and sit when I have my friends over to sing concerts where I live, especially for my son's community. You know, the girls come over, we're at the kitchen table first. Later on, we move over to where we're all sitting on the floor, and sometimes we're singing music and being in that present time. But it is so true, and I think that quote really makes us feel that exact thing. Life used to happen around those tangible social areas and not in your actual notifications. And I think that the reason we've become so nostalgic is because we are starting to feel that something really important is lost. Now we're into the age of AI. Let me just tell you how much I know about AI, which is zero. Okay. I mean, I know what it is. I know what it does. I watch what it does, but it's this invisible, unexplainable thing to me. I mean, the best minds I know in my circle of friends have tried to explain it to me, you know, by simply saying something like Google, you know, it's like, which I don't even understand either. How does it happen? How do we take a phone and talk into it and get instant information? To me, that's, you'll never explain it to me, but I will tell you this, by watching and seeing and hearing and participating and doing, and simply speaking from the social aspect of it, with this insurgence of AI, I think it's making us feel, or maybe I'm going to go out on the limb and say, I know it's making a lot of us feel like the humanness, the presentness, the mess of life, the warmness, the butterness is being taken out. And this kind of super robo techno essence of whatever is taking over. You know, you can ask this anything. You can create a picture, a poster, and sometimes you're even watching things with somebody that you think it is, and it's not that. And it's all foreign in the most core definition of that word. It's something that we don't understand, because in as much as I'm sure the technology has its benefits, right? Change is, I'm a big, you know, the only thing constant is change. We have to move with it. I'm that girl, but this feels like it's disrupting my soul. And you can think, okay, Chris, that's a little high drama, but it's not for me, because everything for me starts at the social and at the emotional and at the core of who we are as human beings, and that the thoughts that we have and the things that we create and the people that we are. And so this feels like it's disrupting that core element of all of that that's in my soul. It makes me feel like that old song, we gotta get out of this place. If it's the last thing we ever do. I feel like that's how I feel about this new step into technology. And yes, I'm on board with change. I'm not a person that wants to stay stuck in one way of doing things, because we wouldn't have all of the great things that we have in each generation of humanity if we didn't move forward and discover and find the new things. But I'm definitely feeling personally concerned that although we're headed into uncharted territory, I mean, that goes without saying, that we now have to find the balance. We have to find the balance between accepting what's new and moving into a new space of humanity while holding on to what was before. And I feel like watching all of the content that's being created, that we, the collective, we are almost scrambling backwards, to hold on, to keep close. We're realizing that if we let it all go this time, it really might be gone. Whereas prior, I grew up, I've said it before, my mom was so big on nostalgia. My mom was nothing was as good as my day kind of gal. Everything was greater in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, okay? I think my mother would have probably cut it off there, okay? When the 70s came along, my mother was definitely a traditional kind of gal. She didn't know how to be hip and get with the, women's liberation movement, as we called it back then. And she wasn't somebody who was hell-bent on discussing the new women's discussions of sexuality. Like, this was my mom. My mom was old school. We were Roman Catholic. You followed the rules. She wasn't going to be engaging in any of that kind of content. She was very resistant to change. And even when she was in her later years, she loved to talk, which we all do. And I think it's a hallmark of older people. She loved to talk about the good old days, but was adamant that nothing maybe past the 1960s, nothing good came out of that, only the Leave It to Beaver days, only the days which she felt very structured and comfortable in, and sensibilities were so different. But to me, that's what I like to think of as a natural sense of nostalgia. It's kind of like me saying, all the bands of the 70s were so great. They don't make them like that anymore. There's no more Chicago, and there's no more Earth, Wind and Fire. But recently, and I've admitted it to everyone, I have, stopped thinking like that and started searching out like new indie young performers. And, that's kind of like once you dip your toe in that water, it's like everything comes falling right out. The wave comes crashing on the shore. And I've discovered so many new artists and so many new writers and producers that my in the car playlist is now incredibly contemporary. I have somehow put my nostalgic playlists in their place. Like, I feel like the 70s today, so I put on my 70s, but the majority of the stuff I'm listening to is stuff that's being created right now. I'm definitely in my, new pop music era. It's never too late to embrace what's coming up. And you'll find that just like everything else, for me being a musician, music has that, it transcends, right? The same love story is being told in the 60s as being told in the 90s as is being told in 2026. You just have to tap into the great writers and the good performers and embrace that. A lot of people I know that are my age, they're kind of nervous to embrace the young because it makes them realize that for us, and I say this with a positive spin to it, but it's just simply fact. There's way more in our rear view than in our windshield. That's just the fact. And I think that the young make some of our people, my age people, my generation, feel a little bit like, oh my God, they're feeling a little breathless about it, where I feel energized about it. I love change, but this change, I think we are coming to our own conclusions, and those conclusions are being come to by younger people in our society. I'm watching all of this content, and what I'm actually seeing is people the visual in my head is scrambling back. We're scrambling back to grab onto the radio, to grab onto the phone, to grab onto the Pizza Hut logos and the Clay Aiken songs of American Idol in the days of the Powerpuff Girls, and we were striving to show our kids those Barney shows. And I have friends that said I have actually a friend that said her daughter has purchased on eBay VHS tapes of old shows to show her child. She wants her child to be able to pull the tape out like she did. And she actually still has a VHS player. Okay, am I going to go that far? Maybe not, but that's her way. That's her way of holding on before it all lets go. So I think we might all be on to something. I think we might all be on to something in this. I think nostalgia at this time is a tool rather than a natural nostalgia of remember when. I think this nostalgia is a bit of a tool. It's a remember when, and let's hold on to that as we move forward. Let's pack all of that in our suitcase. Let's bring some of that into our future. Let's create some of that for our children so they have that sensibility as well. Because remember, the children that are actually here today, our kids that are 7, that are 9, that are 15, they don't know anything different. They only know being in this highly fast-paced, ever-changing technological world in which a lot of our relating, our skills, our love, our joy, our sadness, it's all there in a little screen. And so giving our child that option, giving our child that alternative, giving our children collectively the alternative to keep that balance. If we can do that and we can make ourselves mindful of that, we can spread that word and we can continue working on that in our personal life and in our wider community life, I probably wouldn't be as concerned as I am. Not terrified, just a little concerned. We don't want to go over into that next step and then realize, oh my goodness, we don't have anybody who remembers. We don't have anybody who has that feeling left in them anymore. So there we have it. I'm very, very focused on this lately. I think it's because I am seeing the younger generation. I am seeing my great niece, my great nephew. I want them to have those pieces of who we are as humanity as they move forward. And as we move forward, we'll see you next time at the Wish House.